The night Illyra Voss arrived at Moonfire Palace, the sky was heavy with storm clouds, as if the moon itself refused to look upon what was about to happen. She stood at the base of the great stone steps, her hands trembling inside the sleeves of her traveling cloak, staring up at the towers that pierced the dark sky like sharpened claws. She had heard stories about the Alpha King Kaelin Draven her whole life, stories of his strength, his victories in battle, and the cold silence that surrounded him like a wall no one could climb. She had never imagined that fate would bind her to him as his true mate. The bond had announced itself 3 days earlier, during the gathering of Pax, when their eyes met across the crowded hall, and a jolt of recognition passed through her chest, so strong that she nearly fell to her knees. Kaelin had felt it too. She had seen it in the brief widening of his eyes before his expression hardened into something unreadable. He had not smiled. He had not spoken a single warm word to her. He had simply turned to his guards and ordered that she be brought to the palace at once. Now, standing before him in the throne room, Illyra realized that whatever she had hoped for in a mate, it would not be found here. Kaelin sat upon his throne like a statue carved from ice, his broad shoulders squared, his jaw tight. His dark eyes studied her the way a general studies an enemy's weakness. "You will be given quarters in the West Tower," he said, his voice flat and final. "Guards will be posted at your door at all times. You will not leave without my permission." Illyra blinked, certain she had misheard. "My permission? I am your Luna, not your prisoner." "You are whatever I decide you are," Kaelin replied, and something flickered behind his eyes, something that looked almost like pain before it vanished behind his usual coldness. "This is for your protection." She wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, but the guards were already stepping forward to escort her away, and the look on Kaelin's face told her that no words would change his mind that night. The West Tower was beautiful in the way that gilded cages are beautiful. The room had tall windows overlooking the forest, soft furs upon the bed, and shelves lined with books she was never given time to read, because the ache in her chest made it impossible to concentrate. Days passed, then weeks. Illyra watched the moon rise and fall from behind glass she was forbidden to open without a guard present. She was fed well, dressed in fine clothing, and treated with a strange, distant courtesy by the staff, yet she had never in her life felt more alone. She tried, at first, to understand him. She asked the servants gentle questions about their king, hoping to find some thread of reason behind his cruelty. It was an older maid named Sable who finally told her the truth, her voice lowered, as though the walls themselves might report her words to the throne. "He was mated once before," Sable said, folding linen with careful hands. "Years ago, before you came. Her name was Isolde. She was cunning and beautiful, and the king loved her more than his own life. She used that love to poison half his council, and nearly handed our kingdom to a rival pack before he discovered her betrayal. He killed her himself, my lady, and he has never been the same wolf since. He does not trust love. He does not trust mates. He trusts walls and locked doors and guards who report every whisper." Illyra absorbed this information slowly, feeling both anger and a strange, unwanted sympathy stir within her. It did not excuse his cruelty, but it explained the shadows behind his eyes. Still, understanding a wound did not mean she had to accept being punished for it. That night, alone in her tower, she allowed herself to cry for the first time since arriving. Not loud, racking sobs, but quiet tears that slid down her cheeks and fell onto the stone windowsill, catching the moonlight like tiny fallen stars. She did not know that far below, in the forest surrounding the palace, the wolves of the kingdom lifted their heads all at once and began to howl, a sound so mournful and strange that the night watch reported it to the king himself. Kaelin stood on his balcony that night, listening to the howling rise from the trees, and felt something shift inside his own chest, though he could not explain why. He told himself it was nothing. Wolves howled at storms, at prey, at the moon. It meant nothing. But it happened again the next night. And the next. Weeks passed in this strange rhythm. Illyra wept quietly in her tower, unaware that each tear seemed to stir the very bones of the earth beneath the kingdom. The howling grew more frequent, more unified, as though every wolf for miles was answering a call only they could hear. The moon, too, began to change, glowing with a faint reddish tint that the elders whispered about with fear in their voices, speaking of old legends that most had dismissed as myth. Illyra herself began to notice small, strange things. Her reflection in still water sometimes seemed to shimmer with a silver light behind her eyes. Her senses sharpened beyond what she remembered feeling before, as though she could hear conversations happening 2 floors below her tower, could smell the rain coming an hour before the first cloud appeared. She did not understand what was happening to her, and there was no one she trusted enough to ask. Meanwhile, whispers moved through the palace halls like smoke. The council members, ambitious and watchful, began to question their king's judgment. Word had spread that the new Luna was being kept locked away, and allied pacts who had once respected Kaelin's strength now worried they had bound themselves to a tyrant. Alliances that had taken years to build began to fray at the edges. It was Bastion, Kaelin's oldest friend and the commander of his personal guard, who finally dared to speak the truth no one else would say. He found the king alone in his study late one night, staring into a dying fire. "The pacts are turning against you," Bastion said without preamble. "They say you have become what you swore never to become, a king who fears his own mate more than his enemies." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "I am protecting this kingdom." "You are protecting yourself," Bastion said quietly, stepping closer. "I watched you after Isolde. I watched what her betrayal did to you. But Illyra is not her, Kaelin. You locked away an innocent woman because you are terrified of feeling anything again. That is not strength. That is cowardice wearing a crown." The words struck harder than any blade could have. Kaelin said nothing, but that night he could not sleep. He walked the corridors until his feet carried him, almost against his will, to the base of the West Tower. He looked up at the single-lit window and saw her silhouette against the glass, still and sorrowful, staring out at a world she was not allowed to touch. For the first time since her arrival, something inside him cracked. The following evening brought chaos no one had predicted. A group of conspirators within the council, fearing the erosion of their power under a king who seemed to be unraveling, made their move. They believed that removing the new Luna would restore order, allow them to control the throne through Kaelin's grief, as they once had through Isolde's influence. Under the cover of a supposed maintenance visit, 2 guards loyal to the conspirators entered Illyra's chambers with poison hidden in a vial of wine. Illyra, her senses sharper than they had ever been, smelled the danger before she saw it. There was something wrong in the way the guards moved, something wrong in the false politeness of their smiles. When one of them lunged toward her with the vial, instinct overtook her entirely. A sound tore from her throat that was not quite human and not quite wolf. A cry of raw fear and fury combined. The silver light that had flickered in her reflection for weeks suddenly blazed to life, spreading across her skin like moonlight given form. Her bones shifted, not into the shape of an ordinary wolf, but into something larger, older, more radiant, a creature that seemed to carry the weight of 100 generations within her. The guards fled in terror as the ancient wolf, the legendary spirit said to awaken only within a true Luna, pushed beyond her limits, stood revealed in the tower room. Windows shattered outward from the force of her transformation. Alarms rang throughout the palace. Kaelin reached the tower stairs at a dead run, his heart pounding with a fear unlike any he had felt in battle. When he burst through the door and saw her, silver and radiant, and trembling with the effort of containing so much power, he did not see a monster. He saw, at last, the truth Bastion had tried to show him. He saw a woman who had endured his cruelty in silence, whose pain had been so deep it had awakened something ancient and sacred, and who was still, even now, more concerned with the danger around her than with her own suffering. "Illyra," he said, his voice breaking in a way it never had before. She turned toward him, her eyes glowing silver, tears still visible even in her transformed state. "You locked me away," she said, her voice layered with something ancient and something achingly human all at once. "You feared me before you ever knew me." "I know," Kaelin said, stepping closer despite the danger, despite everything he had built his life around avoiding. "I was wrong. I let fear build my walls higher than my love. I was so terrified of losing another mate to betrayal that I punished you for a crime you never committed." Illyra's form began to shift back, the silver light softening, as her fury gave way to exhaustion and disbelief. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I would rather burn this entire kingdom to the ground than lose you the way I lost her," Kalen said, his voice raw. "Not to betrayal. Not to my own foolishness. I built a cage to protect my heart, and instead, I nearly destroyed the very thing I was trying to save." The guards who had betrayed the crown were captured within the hour, their conspiracy unraveling swiftly once Bastion and the loyal council members moved against them. The kingdom that had teetered on the edge of rebellion began to steady itself once more, though the true change had already happened, quietly, in a shattered tower room, where a king finally let down his walls. In the days that followed, Kalen did not simply apologize with words. He removed the guards from her door. He opened every window in the West Tower, and then, eventually, moved her belongings to the chambers beside his own, not as a command, but as an invitation she was free to refuse. He sat with her in the evenings, sharing stories of his past, of Isolde's betrayal, and the years of isolation that followed, allowing her to see the wounds beneath his crown. In turn, Elira shared her own fears, her own grief at losing the freedom she once knew, and slowly, carefully, something new began to grow between them, built not on fate or bloodlines, but on honesty. Elira's connection to the ancient wolf did not fade. If anything, it grew stronger, though it no longer emerged from pain alone. She learned to call upon it in moments of calm, discovering it was not a separate creature at all, but the truest expression of who she was, a descendant of the kingdom's first Luna bloodline, a lineage thought lost to legend. The wolves of the forest, once distressed by her sorrow, now howled with something closer to celebration whenever she walked among the trees. The council that had once conspired against the throne now watched their king with new respect, seeing a ruler who had faced his greatest fear and chosen love over control. Allied pacts, hearing of the Luna who had awakened an ancient power, and the king who had humbled himself to earn her trust, began sending envoys once more, eager to renew alliances with a kingdom that seemed, for the first time in years, to be ruled by wisdom rather than fear. Months later, standing together on the same balcony where Kalen had once listened to distant howling and told himself it meant nothing, the two of them watched the moon rise full and silver over Moonfire Kingdom. Elira leaned against him, no longer a prisoner, no longer merely a mate bound by prophecy, but a partner chosen freely, again and again, in every quiet moment since the tower had shattered. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Everything that happened?" Kalen wrapped his arm around her, his voice steady with a certainty that had taken him far too long to find. "I regret the pain I caused you. I will spend the rest of my life making certain you never doubt your place beside me again. But if it took all of that to bring us here, to this moment, then I cannot regret where we stand now." Below them, the forest wolves lifted their voices to the moon once more, no longer a cry of sorrow, but a song of unity, echoing across the kingdom as a reminder that even the coldest walls could be broken, and even the deepest fear could, in time, be transformed into love.